Barber, and I was lieutenant junior grade when I was in Vietnam, and I retired as a Navy captain from the Navy Reserve.
Larry Linkous, Radar in 3rd class.
The incident occurred on March 19th, 1969, and what had happened, we had just started patrolling the river, the Kuadai River complex. They had moved the fiberglass PBRs further inland, and they brought Swifts in to patrol the deeper areas of the river. I was the first boat to run a multiple day patrol. Usually we were only out for like 36 hours maximum at any one time. In this particular case, we were going to rotate crews in, but my boat was going to stay in for several days and to bring the first crew out after a day, and we'd start rotating crews in, leave them in for at least 2 days, because then you build up some experience. You understand the river and all those kinds of things. So we were on I think the 2nd or 3rd day of that little patrol. And every day at 5 o'clock, we had made the mistake of coming down the river to avoid the tide going out, being trapped upstream. We crossed this one sandbar, which later became known as Ambush Alley. And when you came over the sandbar, it'd say, maybe 10, 15 knots, you backed off the engines. The weight picked up the boat and literally carried it across the sandbar, so you could clear the bar. Well, at this particular day, I was the second boat, but the first boat ahead of me, Lieutenant Wynandy's boat, saw a fishing net in the water, and decided that probably the Viet Cong were using it to fish at night. They would have these little fishing bunkers, they would hide out, they would put nets out, and they would draw them in and catch fish at night. So we drew the net in, told me to go around. I went around, and just as I got to the sandbar, my quartermaster, Bill Pfeffer, was at the helm, and usually as soon as we hit the bar and the boat picked up and we knew we were clear, we just gave it, blank speed. Well, just as we hit blank speed, the first round of a 57 or 75 millimeter recoilless rifle hit amidships, and when it did, it severed all the controls. So we had no control. It was just nothing there. And then I think the smoke, just black smoke, became just started billowing out of the pilot house. I was in the pilot house, both doors were closed, and when the first round hit, I heard it hit behind me. I was standing right on the little hatch, the area where you could go down to the main cabin. I turned and looked into it, and when I did, the flames, I guess, just came out and singed, burned all the hair off in front of my face, all my eyebrows, and little burns all through my uniform. And the smoke filled up. It was so thick you could not see your hand in front of your face. I know Larry remembers firefighting school. You went through that. You go through a smoke training where you literally cannot see, your hand in front of your face, and you have to trust. Well, anyway, that black smoke filled up the pilot house. Bill Pfeffer and I went to the starboard side, opened the hatch. Flames were coming up into the pilot house. The starboard door was closed. We were leaning out. I looked down aft, and all I could see was flames coming out of the window. Smoke was all around us, and the next thing I knew, either a second round hit or we had a secondary explosion, because we did have, if I'm correct, carried rounds in the main cabin, especially white phosphorus rounds, because you had to carry them vertically, so that whatever they used for the pellet didn't settle to one side and cause you to wobble around. But anyway, next thing I know, explosion, and I'm falling on top of Bill Pfeffer, and we literally just sort of, like you would tumble off the side of a swimming pool, we just fell off the side of the boat into the water. The boat comes by, we come up, and the second boat comes by and almost runs over us. And I'll let Larry kind of pick it up from there, because he's on deck and he's seeing straight ahead, he's seeing the fire come from the other shore. And I'm in the water with Bill Pfeffer, and let him pick it up.
And at that point, we didn't know, or I didn't know, that nobody was driving. That Bill and Mr. Barber were both in the water, and there was 4 Vietnamese ARVN troops in the main cabin, and the 75 millimeter recoilless rifle were basically rockets. Then we were heading toward shore, where the fire was coming from, and I was just firing what I could, but there was so much black smoke you really couldn't see a lot, but we did. And that went on for seemed like a good while, and then Woody came over there. Well, we slowed down and the boat went up onto the sandbar, And he came over and asked me how I was, and I said, I'm fine. And Gary Peterson, our bosun's mate, was injured. And so I think we put him in the water first, and maybe the gunner's mate took him, I forget it.
Yeah,
I think Sarah took Gary.
And the engineman was Ron Wood, just to add that. He was in the peak tank. He was in the very front of the boat. He really couldn't see anything, and Larry was in the very aft of the boat in the 50, so they really couldn't see each other.
Right, but Ron Wood, I mean, saw that we were heading towards shore and looked back in the pilot house and saw that it was on fire. And so he left the peak tank and went down the side of the boat, because on swift boats you have controls at the aft part of the boat also, the steering wheel and your controls. And he went from, we were running full bore, he went from full forward to full reverse without stopping in the middle. Normally speaking, you would let it, stop in the middle, let the revolution go out and then go. And those diesels just churned and made all sorts of noises. But to stop, the boat just nosed up onto the beach. And we actually hit the beach, and then it just backed off. And then he turned and headed us upriver. And so we were on the back of the boat, and we put Gary into the water, and I think Gunner was in the water, and I said, "Where's Mr. Barber?" And he said, "He's dead." And I said, "Are you sure?" He says, "Yeah, he's in the main cabin." And I went up the side of the boat, and there was something vertical that was just on fire. And we both thought that that was Mr. Barber. And so I was in the water, and Woody handed me, amazingly enough, 2 Vietnamese. So I had one under each arm, because we were only in 3-4 foot of water. And Mr. Wanandi by that time was alongside, and we're walking him over, and Mr. Wanandi asks Ron, he says, "Where's Mr. Barber?" And Ron says, "He's dead, sir." And I mean, that was just not what you wanted to hear. And then we got on to Mr. Wanandi's boat, and he took us to the coastal group. And by that time, the medevac helicopter had gotten there, and they put the Vietnamese on first because they weren't serious. Well, we ultimately found out that they all died. But I was walking with Gary Peterson, our bosun's mate, and he said, "Larry, I can't walk anymore." So I picked him up with my daily carry people, I guess.
He was shot in the leg, I believe.
Yeah, and carried him to the helicopter, because there was so much going on that they didn't have enough people between the Vietnamese and everybody else that was injured. So I carried Gary to the helicopter, and then went back to the coastal group. And then by that time, that's when all the other boats started coming, and gosh, we had gunships and Hueys and everything was in the river.
I actually, at the point where Ron Wood came back and grabbed the controls, we were actually standing in the water. I saw him do that. I stood up in the water about waist deep. Bill Pfeffer was near me, and I'm not sure if I realized that the other individual, Lieutenant Bob Andretta, was actually in the water with us. He had been on the other side of the boat. And so when the ground hit, he was standing on the catwalk, which is very narrow, right by the pilot house, and it knocked him over. The boat actually took a little jerk, so he probably was not holding on, because it was a routine. We didn't expect anything. And they said we should have, because we came by the same point in the river every night and did the same routine for 3 days in a row, and that set you up. But we were in the water, we observed, I watched Ron Wood do that, what Larry just described, was go from flank speed to full reverse. I could hear the boat shudder, and just prior to that, the 58 boat, he comes so close to us that if I stretched my arm, it was only just a few inches. And we thought we were going to be run over. We were yelling, we were screaming, but they didn't see us because they were focused on the far shore. And when they went down the river, when they pulled the boats and Larry and the rest of the crew headed down river, of course it became like this dead quiet. We looked around, we're standing in water waist deep, and all of a sudden we see these little blips in the water. And either the NBA or Viet Cong were standing up on the other shore with rifles, and they were shooting at us. So they shot at us, and we were trying. We said, "What do we do?" So we went underwater and grabbed the roots of these, because we were right near this little island, I guess, right there on the spit that sort of stuck out in the main channel. We found these roots in the bottom of the river, and just pulled ourselves along till we could get away. We'd come up, get a breath of fresh air. We came around and finally got around sort of this little island where we were out of the direct fire of these folks. At one point, I reached up and I had blood on my head, And I didn't know if I had hit something in the water or whether, you know, I had struck, whether I had been hit by a bullet or grazed, or I had struck something that might have been in the water when I jumped in. But I observed all this happening, and it was quite frightening to see, you know, them go down river and leave us there. And
but for them falling off, you have to understand, when the first round hit, you know, everybody, and I with my gun, it's, you know, a large gun mounted on a tripod, and I'm good side here, so I was pretty much, you know, when the second round hit, the boat pitched so much that the gun went over to the side, and we have a super shooter on the side. It's a big can that holds 400 rounds, and the boat, and it just went down and over, and kind of got stuck there, and it took all I could do to get it back vertical again so I could keep shooting. But that's how much the boat pitched, so it's no wonder they got off, you know, if they were going down the side, because it was a pretty severe pitch.
We were trying to get air leaning out the door, and that's why I think I just literally fell on top of Bill Feller, because he didn't, you know, later on he said, I don't remember, you know, leaping, jumping, doing anything. He said, no, Bill, I fell on top of you.
Yeah, and the boat, I mean, it went pretty hard sideways. Yeah, heeled over real hard.
Now, how did you get picked up?
Well, we moved around to a position at night. It was about around 5 in the afternoon maybe, and you know it was getting dark, and so we tried to find a place to hide out. And so there was an old fishing bunker that they call them, where they literally hollowed out right next to the water where the VC used to hide out. And we kind of hollowed out. But before that, and Barber met with us and linked up with us, and he said, I'm going to go around the other side of the island and see if I can't get it, because by that time some boats had come back down, I believe, and just to check it out, maybe Lieutenant Juan Andy's boat had come down. So he left to go around, and he was gone for a long time. Matter of fact, he never came back. We said, we don't know what's happened. So we decided we needed to find a place to hide out for the evening.
I was still at the coastal group. We didn't leave the river. We stayed in the river all night. Our backup boat picked us up, but everybody else was out. It was interesting because, you know, Sonny ended up losing his pants and his shoes. And to this day, I understand, when there were the last two on the boat were Woody and I. Everybody else was in the water, and he and I were, the Vietnamese that were in the main cabin were in very bad shape, and we were, I think I gave a couple, you know, handed those to Stiper. I think he was in the water, the gunner's mate, and then Woody handed me the last two. But there's other stuff about that whole incident. But Woody told me to take my shoes off before I jumped in the river. And he was our leading petty officer. And I'm not sure why he wanted me to do that, but I did. And so that kind of happened to me because I didn't have any shoes for the rest of the night until we got back to the Nang, I guess. So I basically stayed in the coastal group and monitored the radios for all the activity, whether they were looking for him, and all the groups coming in to help look for the three that were missing. The morning I found out he was okay, without a doubt. And that was just a long, long night. I mean, we had only known each other for 3 or 4 months, but yet we had similar circumstances. We were, you know, same age, both recently engaged, and and you know, we were close even that soon. And you know, the fact that Mr. Barber and Bill Pfeffer, you know, were unaccounted for, and to find out the next morning that they were okay,